Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Lurie Rita. I'm the Artistic Director at the Palm Springs International Film Society. Thank you so much for joining us for a very special conversation for The Outpost, which is available now on Netflix. We have screenings lined up for December and through 2021. If you're not a member of the Palm Springs Film Society yet, we invite you to visit our website at psfilmfest.org for more information. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our good friend Peter Debruge, Chief Film Critic at Variety, who will lead us in conversation. Welcome, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily. So we are assuming that you've seen the film, and we're going to dive into a conversation with director Rod Laurie. And Rita Wilson is also joining us. Rita did the song that, let's say you came over to the Q&A just after seeing the film. If that's not the order you did it, maybe you should go make sure you watch the film, and you'll be buzzing off of the high. Well, let's start, Rita, with your song, since it plays over the end credits. You wrote this song. I'm sorry, did you write the song or?
Well, actually, Rod Laurie, our faithful and trusted director, wrote the song, and Larry Groupé, the composer, and myself. I think when Rod gets into talking a little bit about the background to writing the song, which I think it's probably better if he tells that story because it's very, very personal.
Sure, we can build up to that.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm honored to be a part of it as a co-writer and also as a singer.
Great. We will come back to the song later in the conversation, but Rod, this movie took kind of a really personal turn for you as you were preparing it, and maybe we can share that story with our viewers here.
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, it does really inform almost everything about the film. This is a movie, as everyone knows, about a unit 361 Cav who were stuck at the base of the Hindu Kush Mountains and had to deal with almost like a Zulu-like. Remember that film, Peter? The Zulu-like attack on their outpost. There were just 53 men, and they dealt with hundreds and hundreds of Taliban. And the film deals with the 2 men who received the Medal of Honor and the 8 men who perished in the battle. And it's an extremely difficult movie to put together, Peter. And I'm in Bulgaria, and we finally are in prep on the film. And I got the word from my mother, actually, that my son Hunter was in a hospital in Michigan. And when I called that hospital, they told me that he was, quote unquote, not going to make it. And, I'm in Bulgaria, and he's in the podunk town in Michigan. And I had to find a way to get there. And I had to find a way to get there before he passes away. And I remember I called my ex-wife, and I called my wife, and I called my daughter, and I said, you guys get to Michigan, and you just keep talking to Hunter. Keep him alive until I get there. And I, with the help of Millennium, who made this film, I did eventually get there. And it was terrible. I mean, it was, he had suffered a blood clot, and it really was over. And I had to make the decision to remove him from all the life support systems. And the nurse told me, and a lot of people that are watching this right now have had experiences similar to this, and they can probably relate. And to those of you, I'm with you. They told me he had 20 minutes left. And in that 20 minutes, my daughter said to me, Dad, I know that you feel you cannot go and make this film right now, but you have to go and make it. Because Hunter was this amazing cineast. And the last time I ever saw him was with the cast of The Outpost. She said, if this film falls apart because of that, you would destroy him.
Mm.
And Peter, he's literally dying. And I get on the phone and I call Millennium. And I said, I know you have a list of people that you've already made. And I was right. There were were going to replace me already, which they should have done. That's a responsible thing to do when you can separate your emotion from the needs of the film. But I said, I'm going to come back, but I'm going to make the film, I'm going to make it my way. And everyone needs to get out of the way. If you don't want me to come, I won't, but you have to understand that. And they said, come back. And I realized when Hunter died that he was the same age as these men, right? He was 27 years old. And I guess we can come to the song almost immediately because I had always thought, Peter, that I wanted to have a song in the film that the soldiers would sing amongst themselves. They had written it for themselves. And then we would have just this beautiful voice at the end of the film over the memoriam and over the credits that would then take over, these unprofessional voices singing throughout the film. But I didn't know what that song was going to be. So I'm on this very long flight from the United States to Bulgaria. And, I'd written a couple of songs for my other films. And I decided I'm going to write this now. And I knew what it had to be about, which is more or less trying to understand the death that is to come. And to understanding the death that can come so suddenly. And, the families, they were also with me and they had called me up and I was just inspired by them. And I just started to write and write and write and write. And when I landed in Bulgaria, I took what I had written and I sang it into a tape recorder. And I sent it to my composer, Larry Groupe. And he put the sheet music on it. He interpreted my notes into the real notes. And then I made the decision that I wanted to have a female voice because the film is so male, as you know. And we contacted Rita. She had a big fan, Rita, in Jonathan Younger, who is a producer on the film and the president of Millennium. And you didn't know him, right, at all, Rita? You had no idea.
No, it was a cold call.
Yeah, it was cold call. So we called, and then Rita's a professional songwriter, and so we continued to refine the song, and I must say I'm really happy when the singer does that because she, in addition to helping try to get the message I wanted across, she also knew how the song would best be written coming out of her mouth, and so. I was in the States and she was in Greece and she sang it and I have to say that I just fell completely apart, Peter, because I just looked at it. Everything's about my son to me right now. Everything.
To me, it was like there was, when Rod told me his experience with his son, and there was a very, very simplified version of the song that I had listened to, and that he wanted a female voice. To me, that I understood that from a mother's point of view, or from a sister's point of view, or a daughter, or a service person, because I think there isn't a parent alive who doesn't send their child off to serve and want them to come home. And we never think that it's going to happen to us. We never think that that will be visited on our lives, on ourselves. And the story alone was just devastating. And yet Rod had the courage to continue on making the movie. And I think that that's so much of what resonated with me, was that so much courage is out there. People are constantly having to get up and live their lives and continue on. And it, oddly enough, they were shooting in Bulgaria, and my dad was Bulgarian and my mom was Greek, and my dad was raised in Bulgaria. And when my dad died, at his funeral, there's a thing, in multiple cultures where they have people come in and actually mourn or grieve, which allows the release of emotion from the people that are there to at the funeral or to witness the burial. And so there was a Bulgarian instrument called a gaida that we brought in, and a female vocalist who was singing lamentations, sort of dirges and lamentations of getting somebody's spirit from, out of their earthly body and into the spirit world. And to me, it just felt I understood why he wanted that. And I think probably just an intuitive, instinct that you had, Rod, to have that female voice. But it did feel to me like it was a representation of the women that are unseen in the movie, because there's so many men in the movie. I think there's only one woman at the very end.
There's only one woman, and she's at the very end of the film. And I decided, and she wasn't even in the film, Peter, until I decided about 2 weeks before shooting that scene that I wanted that scene in the film, and I wrote it. And it's a psychiatrist speaking to one of the two men who received the Medal of Honor.
Right.
Movie.
In a way, the lyrics of this song are, just getting to this sort of the fragility of life, and I think that's something that when you're telling this story, you kind of immerse us very directly. It's within a few minutes that the first kind of attack comes, and what you're doing as a filmmaker is a form of exposition, but it doesn't feel like you're really immersing us in that experience, and we understand because there's a fatality right there at the start, and there's that this is their daily existence, and from then on, our adrenaline, everything is kind of in that space.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that, Peter, because in the original screenplay, we had all sorts of scenes that were not on the base. This is called Combat Outpost Keating, and it's at the bottom of the Hindu Kush Mountains. It's in the Nuristan Valley in northeastern Afghanistan, and I decided, and largely this came from our budget being slashed, that I had to eliminate a bunch of scenes. So I said, I'm going to eliminate all the scenes that don't take place on the base. And I want everything in the point of view of these soldiers, right? Everything is from their point of view. And that's the way that, as you use the word immersion, and I think that's very appropriate. That's what we were going for. That's why you never see a Taliban until our guys see them, which is when they eventually invaded and got onto the base. It's the first time that you see a Taliban face. I sat with those guys in Millennium, and I told them, in many ways, I told them, first of all, it's not an action film, because Millennium does a lot of action films. They do The Expendables, they do Rambo, they do a great job with them. They're fun, but this is not.
Well, obviously there's action in it. So what did you mean by that?
Well, it's in an action film. There's never really that much danger to your lead actor. You know that they're gonna survive. The laws of physics are often completely ignored, and it's pure entertainment. Here, I said we're doing a war film, and that means that we need to immerse yourself into a very scary and unsettling experience where you don't know what's going to happen. And in fact, you never know when anybody can, it's a true story. That means anybody could buy it at any moment in this film. And we have, for those who have not seen the film, you may be surprised by who dies and who doesn't die in the film itself. But I also said it's also a bit of a horror film, because in those mountains, and by the way, I'm a military guy. I'll tell you, the worst possible decision ever made by our military was putting these outposts at the bases of these mountains. Terrible decision. And it's interesting, I know very well I know personally the person who made this decision. And it's maybe the one mistake that guy's ever made. Right now, he's a 4-star, very successful general. But I think even
you met him in the preparation for this film, or someone you knew?
No. He he was, when I was, I'm a West Point graduate. When I was at West Point, this guy was my squad leader. He was the guy that hazed me, tried to chase me out of the academy. So I knew him really well. His name is Mick Nicholson, and he's a fantastic general. But I think this was a mistake, and I haven't spoken to him. I imagine he may think so as well. But I said it's really a horror film as well, I told the guys, because these are the sounds and the bullets coming out of nowhere, just surrounding you. You never know when they're going to come. And so one of the things that I was hoping to accomplish, and one of the reasons why the film is rather episodic, is that there's no story per se to follow for the first half. It's just keeping you tense that these guys, at any split second, they can be talking about the most random stuff and their heads are blown off. And I think that tension works, and in a way the battle scene becomes an explosion of that tension.
Well, and I went into the movie sort of not knowing the news behind it, and not even necessarily realizing that it was a rigorous true story. You know, it was because I'm just on a steady diet of movies, and the next one comes along. But so there was a sort of moment early on when I thought I was watching, you know, Wages of Fear or Sorcerer. You know, there's Orlando Bloom, you're the biggest star in your movie, taking, you know, this vehicle along this impossibly narrow path, and that does not become the plot. It is just sort of, but it's also a tool for you to tell us something else about kind of, what I mean is, as an audience, we're immediately learning something from the outcome of that scene, right, as to the kind of situation everybody's in, and suddenly the new stakes, you know, yeah, they don't even have a father figure anymore.
That's right. And so what we're going for in that scene and in this movie is the concept of randomness. You know, anything can happen at any moment, and there's just some weird shit that happens. There was a scene that was cut out of the film, and not, you know, that is one of my favorite scenes in the movie. I'm not even sure if you saw it, Rita, when I showed you the film, but there's a scene where they discover a baby in the middle of the mountains.
Wow.
Yeah,
no, and
they have to decide what to do with it, because if they take the baby back to safety, the villagers might accuse them of kidnapping this baby. And that scene will be in the director's cut, which we showed in theaters for a special Fathom event, but will be on a DVD that will be released on Memorial Day. And but again, it's the concept of this randomness of just the shit that happens at any moment. By the way, Peter, if I may just interrupt this interview for 1 second, I want a point of a privilege here. You know, you were the first person to review The Outpost.
Sure, yeah.
And we were, like Variety often is, and The Hollywood Reporter. And I gotta say, you know, for so many people, you don't know this, but for so many people, you create pins and needles like you can't imagine. You know, because you're the critic for Variety, you and Owen.
Well, if I start to imagine it, it just makes it impossible. You just have to do the work. But
I mean, it's like people are really stressed, and then they say, "Well, the Variety review is coming out in 15 minutes," and everybody is really so tense. Luckily, it was a very nice review, but generally speaking, you know, you create a lot of.
Well, and we often will kind of. We'll often kind of put things in sort of a context, and that, you know, like looking at your career, you've had this kind of this really weird bad luck with the openings of your movies. You had a movie that was set to come out right around 9/11, The Last Castle. Yeah. And you know, and you were telling me that, like, this is hardly alone. It's but you know, this one too, you know, sort of the pandemic is something that kind of robbed you of your chance to show this big screen film in the way that you designed it.
Yeah, I mean, we were supposed to screen it you're right, by the way, about The Last Castle. It came out 3 weeks after 9/11, and then Straw Dogs came out at Hurricane Sandy, and now the COVID, you know, but that all sounds very petty compared to the crises that were created by all those situations.
Sure, yeah.
But we were definitely part of the minor collateral damage. But we were supposed to be in South by Southwest, and Rita was going to tour in Korea, I think, with her
We were
music.
touring, I had a tour scheduled for military bases in South Korea.
So everything goes kaput. And then, Peter, big thing was I was going to then do a world premiere at West Point. And I cannot begin to tell you what that would have meant to me, because I was a terrible cadet. I was the worst. And I always dreamed of one day coming back and showing them I'm going to be that comes back on that stage and speaks to the 4,000 cadets in one way or another. And we're going to put that together. And believe me, this movie would have killed at the Academy, right? For reasons we can get into soon, which is why it's killing with vets. But that also, you know, they sent the entire Corps cadets home, and they only came back when they were recalled by the president so that he could give them a speech, right? And
yeah,
so it's yeah. So
yeah, that was a surreal moment too. But one of the things I so appreciate about the film, and I think, you know, to the extent that each director brings his signature to something. I mean, it's you bring your military experience, and that first hour is you know, part of the immersion is hearing how soldiers interact with each other.
Yeah.
Understanding the way that for some of these soldiers this becomes a matter of discipline. You know, like they're wrestling with fear, they're wrestling with addiction, you know, respect issues, all these kind of things. And the culture of the military. I mean, I can't think of, you know, another film that kind of gets at it the way that that first hour of this one does. It reminds me of like David Ayer is to sort of the LA police, as I feel like this movie is to the military. There's just
yeah, you know, yeah. Oliver did that in Platoon. You know, Oliver brought.
Sure, yeah, that's a good point.
But I will tell you this, that I was very reliant on several people who were currently or previously, but just previously in the military to help me get through the experience of telling the story of the modern soldier and the modern Afghanistan war soldier as well, because I graduated into the peacetime army. What I had, Peter, was more than probably any other filmmaker you could imagine, a love for my fellow soldier and a desire to get it completely right. And so we took the screenplay that we had, which was Paul Tamasy, Eric Johnson, very fine screenplay, but we, you know, I gave it to soldiers to soldier it up a little bit, especially the modern soldier. Like, for example, there's a word that they use all the time now, which is dudes. I'm shooting at those dudes. Right?
Okay.
It was never used when I was when I was an Army officer. Dude,
Okay.
never used. But this was an example of the kind of language that people use and the kind of hazing that goes on in the modern Army. One of the things that I said to Millennium when I came aboard, actually, we brought it to them, but when I told them, here, we'll make the movie with you, which they really wanted, but there are going to be a number of, for me, artistic conditions that I could make a movie with, and there were several things that really took them aback, but one of them was, I want to use as many actors as possible who have been soldiers. Now, the reason why this doesn't sit well with a company like Millennium, which makes their films overseas, is that one of the advantages to being overseas is you can use actors from like London and so on, where it's simply not as expensive. They can be as good, and they are as good. They're really disciplined actors. But, you know, Americans, you got to fly them over all the way from America, and you got to fly them first class, and you got to pay them SAG rates, and you got to pay them per
And these people who aren't stars, these are people that you want for authenticity.
Yes, exactly. And especially these guys who are like soldiers turned actors, right? Probably the only one right now that is famous is Adam Driver, and wasn't in the film. But they agreed. And you know, I think they began to understand very early on, Peter, again, war film, not an action film, right? And they began to understand how in order to achieve that, we needed to have people who knew what they were doing. Because God knows that I had a whole shitload of people that didn't know what they were doing and never handled a weapon in their lives. We had to put
Yeah,
all
right.
those guys through basic training. And
Yeah, and obviously war films do that a lot, but what you're doing is you're kind of bringing in, it not only brings in that authenticity, but it communicates a kind of respect that I think the film is showing to these events that were true, and a desire on your part to be authentic to that.
well, let me add to that, because what you're saying to me is very important. I'm really grateful that you caught on to that very, very early on. Our movie ended up being the most downloaded movie of the summer, maybe the year, for something that's not an animated film. I'm not sure what the numbers are, but we did really, really well. And we did very well on Netflix, and the reviews have been really great and so on. But what's been most important to me, and I'm sure Rita would agree with this, in fact, we talked about it, I know she does, it's the veterans who have loved this film, and the veterans who have loved our song. And on Twitter, just keep writing about how authentic and real the film is. And I'll tell you something, Peter, and if anybody that's watching, that's going to make a war film, you need to understand this. The veterans don't give a damn about being made to look like heroes. They know what they are. They don't need monuments built to them. They don't need statues built to them. They want something really simple, Peter, which is that the truth is told. Because this movie got 70% of its audience from a veteran saying to his wife, or to their children, or to their parents or friends, watch this movie, this is how it was. I want you to know what I went through.
Yeah.
And I really do believe we got that right. Do you know, Peter, that there's a guy that was in the Battle of Camdesh. His name is Daniel Rodriguez. He was in the mortar pit. He was, and he was right next to his best friend, Kevin Thompson, when Kevin Thompson became the first person killed in that battle, seconds into the battle. And Daniel Rodriguez plays himself in the movie. And so Daniel had to recreate for us the scene where his best friend dies. Mm-hmm. And he was, when I saw it going on, I mean, his recreation for us, I was taken aback. It was cold, clinical, by the numbers. Here's what happens, did this, did that. There was no emotion from him at all. It was almost like unnerving to see that. Mm-hmm. And then when we were done is when Daniel fell apart. He was a soldier. He did his job. He did it well. And he let himself collapse afterward. At the end of the movie, there's a scene where a character named Lieutenant Bunderman meets his commander for the first time, and he starts to cry. And that was not in the script, and that was not in my direction, Peter. Taylor John Smith, who plays the role beautifully, just did it. And I said, Taylor, I don't know about this crying stuff.
Right.
And you know what he said to me? He said, soldiers, and he was told this by somebody, they don't cry because they're not strong. They cry because they've been too strong for too long.
Like they're holding it in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is the power of that last scene that we already referred to, where you have the one female actor, sort of going through the post-traumatic aspect of this, right. And that there are survivors for whom this film is going, not only the survivors of this incident, but survivors of other incidents, who are going to see themselves in this kind of thing of having lost comrades. And I mean, we have gone from my generation being one that saw no war to my generation witnessing the longest war in American history. Right. And it's just an incredible thing. I mean, for the longest time, I thought of the privilege of, having been a late 70s child, that all that other stuff that Platoon and Apocalypse Now are referencing, MASH, that's in the past, we're more enlightened, and here we are, we can't extract ourselves, and these costs keep perpetuating. And what that means is, I mean, I have a cousin who served, who, you know, later committed suicide, and it's like the trauma of this is enormous. And there are people, you know, the fact that this resonates with veterans, I think, says a lot about how we're not telling this story enough, and we're not telling it in the right way.
You know, yeah, yes, you're absolutely correct. Go ahead, Rita. You want to say something?
Well, one of the things that I loved that you did in the movie was you were talking about how you never know when when an attack would happen. And at the same time, there had to be some semblance of living your life and having a routine and doing things that you do when you are with your buddies. One of the things that I thought was amazing was that they weren't in like full uniforms. They were just in t-shirts and shorts and, you know, but they'd have their weapons nearby. But what I loved was that the song that is called Everybody Cries from the movie, Rod had placed with the soldiers singing just when they're hanging around, like, oh, we're working on a song. This is, you know, what I do. I play the guitar, I come up with the song. And there was something so simple about that, and so basic about, yeah, I'm bored, I'm gonna play my guitar right now, or, you know, talk to my friend, or draw, or it could be anything, but it was just this sort of routine that you might have. And then when that became the song at the end of the movie, it took on a whole different meaning, because now it was real. It
Right.
wasn't just, you know, these guys having, you know, BSing around a campfire. Now this was a song that was going to be show who the real people were that did not make it.
That's right.
In
That's right.
in this battle. And for me, that was just so heartbreaking. And when I was approaching how to perform the song, to me, it had to be in the way that soldiers have courage, in the way that you just described, Rod, where you were talking about Daniel Rodriguez going through the motions of, this is what happened, and then he did this, and then that happened, and he got through it. And it wasn't until the very end that he had an emotional release. And when I was thinking about how to perform it, to me, it was, you know, when you talk to people and they're just relating the facts to you of something that's so devastating that you can't even believe that they're even speaking it. And they would say, yeah, and like you just said, I found out when I was doing this movie that my son was dying, and I had a certain amount of time to get to him. And you just said this like it was matter of fact.
Mhm.
And to me, that was what the song to me was saying. It's so full of emotion.
Right. Well, there's that line.
You can't say it any other way, because if you stop to think about it, you won't be able to get through it.
Right.
You know, as a person.
There's nothing more brave than those voices
from the grave.
From the grave. You know, a lot of the design of the movie, Peter, and I did things that were throughout the entire movie that were aimed towards eliciting or trying to provoke an emotion that was honest. I'll give you an example. First of all, the song is one of the best examples that you play. They clinically sing this song.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't sound, you know, very emotional when they're singing it, but out of Rita's voice, it's overwhelming. And And I'll tell you that when I screened this movie for the Gold Star families, the families of the fallen, they literally thanked me for the song more even than the movie at the end. Although I can talk to you in a second about that the experience of showing the movie to those people, but those wonderful people. But there's something else that I did, which was that in the entire movie, you never hear anybody's first name. Never. Never. And then when you see at the end of the movie and you see the chyrons come on, it says your first name.
Right.
And I just thought that that would have an impact. By the way, it is true that nobody knows anybody's first name in the military. I can tell you that from personal experience. You know, nobody knows anybody's first name. You know, I don't.
Well,
think
just like dramatically, I think about, you know, the difference between this being a true story and other war movies or other action movies is like when you have fatalities in those films, there's usually some sort of poetic reason. Either it can reveal our own biases, why, you know, like the black character dies first in a horror movie, or why someone who kind of like was kind of a jerk ends up, you know, getting a stray bullet later on. But here, one of the powers of it is that unpredictability. And I think your style, the key one, I wouldn't describe it as documentary, but it's adjacent to that. The idea that you're doing these you're from a certain distance. It's often a vantage that's kind of there, and you almost feel like the cameraman could get clipped off at any moment too. And the shots play out and they react sometimes.
Well,
you don't
yes,
you know.
yes, I will tell you that there are some shots that are influenced by other films. You know, I got a couple of ideas. Since he was my mentor for a while, I'll tell you that, you know, some of the death shots are when Tom Hanks' character is killed in Saving Private Ryan, or when he's shot and he's from a distance. I thought that was extremely effective. You have this big movie star and the lead character of the film, and the shooting of them. It's like disrespectful. In a way to get in too close. But the deaths of the characters in our film also was inspired by Hunter in a way, because I realized I think what the families were most fearful of was the Hollywoodization of the deaths of their family members. And I knew that if I was going to have my son's death filmed, I wouldn't want to have music. I would just want the truth told. And that goes back to what we were saying before, you know, simply tell the truth. The other thing that we did, Peter, which was technically very, very difficult, but we found an odd and very efficient way of doing it, was that almost every scene is told as a oneer. Not like 1917, which gives the appearance of the whole thing being in a single shot, right? Right. That was more a feat of editing than it was a feat of cinematography, in my opinion. Although, man, Deakins is like God, so God bless him. But we truly had no stitching, or very little stitching. And we're doing all these complicated oneers. And the point of that is to stick with your character so that you feel in this case, his immersiveness, or his being immersed into this battle. And we'll never be able to replicate for an audience what battle feels like, but we can get them as close as we possibly can. That was another condition of making the film. You can only imagine telling the studio, I want to do these oneers. And
yeah, well, when Cuarón did it in Children of Men, and when you do it here, it's a similar thing, because you kind of like are feeling the pace of a moment, and then that can really turn on you. That moment in Children of Men where they're in the car and it becomes disrupted. You know, it is one of the all-time. It's one of the all-time great moments. Did Chivo photograph that? Do you know? Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So, you know, it's interesting. Here's something I'll say. This is completely disconnected to the film, and just my cheers to that great DP. The greatest filmmaker alive right now is the DP.
Yeah.
That guy
is. You think Lubezki? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, his ideas are they're amazing. But our DP, Lorenzo Senatore, came up with just the most amazing ideas. I told
Yeah.
him to achieve, like, look, can I give you an example?
Please, yeah.
Okay, so think about, there's that sequence where they've got the guy on the stretcher and they're running across the entire battlefield with the guy on the stretcher and into the medical tent or medical building at the end of the movie. That's in one shot.
Mm-hmm.
So absolutely everything's got to be perfect. The explosions have to go perfectly. They have to react to the explosions perfectly. The stuntmen in the background have to go down at the right time. The performance has got to be sort of perfect. And the camera operator has got to be able to keep up with them. All right? Now, this is a 70-pound thing, this contraption, right? Doesn't matter if it's a mini Alexa. The whole rigging is very, very heavy. So that means that if I don't get it on the first take and I got to do another one, that we got to let the poor guy recover. He's like been through a heavyweight fight, normally, right?
He's been through battle, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, so to speak. And so in order to make life easier for him, what we did is, Peter, we disassembled the entire camera and put it into a backpack and put it on the operator's back, and just with a cable with just the lens. So all he's got to carry now is the lens, right?
Yeah.
This was, very, very, it was a difficult feat of engineering, but we did it. And so I think he did like 3 takes of that, but he was able to do it right away. And I didn't have time. We were shooting in Bulgaria in October, meaning that I've got 8 or 9 hours of daylight. So I don't have time, and a very short shooting schedule and very low budget. So I don't have time to monkey about with taking an hour and a half break between shots. And so anyway, that's part of Lorenzo's genius. Was he had heard that Wolfgang Petersen did something like that in Das Boot. And
that makes sense because of the space issue in that case,
yes,
and the cameras would have been. But
yeah.
We don't have a lot more time, but I think you've been entirely too modest, Rod, about like the conditions under which you were making this movie, and you kind of referenced them there. But when a director says we didn't have enough budget, he might be referring to something in the tens of millions.
No.
Here, you're tell us just kind of like so we can better appreciate what you've delivered. I
cannot speak to the what it cost for the actors or what it costs for the Jake Tapper's brilliant book, by the way, just so brilliant. By the way, Jake Tapper gave his advance proceeds from the film to military charities. Nobody does more for the military than Jake among journalists. But I can tell you that it was like way under 5 on the ground over there. I mean, but the Bulgarian crews are like amazing, and they're cost efficient. I would recommend anybody to work with the Bulgarian crews, especially the ones at Ljubljana where we made them. But
and you spent just a few weeks on the whole thing, all told.
Yeah, it's 30 something days on the entire movie. And by the way, Scott Eastwood breaks his ankle right before we start shooting, and broke his ankle. He's got screws in it. It's like he showed up on set in one of those like contraptions where you put your knee down on a wheelchair sort of thing, and it was like, oh my
Geez,
God.
more than you, like they probably should have, looked for.
Well, we knew it when what happened was that the whole film almost, I don't think I've ever said this before, but the whole film almost got canceled because Scott broke his ankle.
Yeah.
It was astonishing. And I had to get on the phone, Peter, with the insurance company and wing an answer as to how I'm going to film this with him. How am I going to pull this off? And I said, the only thing I require from you is that you pay for 2 weeks of a shutdown. Okay, give him more time to recover. And then I took the schedule and I told the insurance company, okay, we're going to shoot all the stuff where Scott is sitting, and then we're going to shoot where he's just standing but not moving. Then we'll shoot the scenes where he moves like 3 feet.
Recover as it goes along.
Yeah. And then we're going to send Scott away for 2 weeks and shoot all of Caleb Landry Jones. By the way, we haven't talked about him.
Amazing.
The best combat performance combat performance of all time. The best war performance of all time is Tom Hanks' Saving Private Ryan, but the best combat performance of all time belongs to Caleb. We'll shoot all his stuff, and then we'll come and shoot Scott's action stuff, and even there we'll shoot it in a sequence where we'll start with the stuff. So insurance company said, okay, and we accomplished it. And Scott Eastwood never been better, you know, and he's great. But sometimes when you see him grimacing, you know, you think he's like, he looks like his dad, but actually, you know, he's gritting his teeth because it hurts so much, you know. It's
amazing to me, though, that every step of the way when you're making a movie is just ripe for failure or ripe for something disastrous to happen. And it's always miraculous when any movie gets made and principal photography is over and it's all like, okay, now all we have to do is edit, because it by all intents and purposes, things should not happen the way that they happen. It's always like mind-boggling to me that things get done.
Yeah.
You're so right, Rita. And it's the thing that's weird. Rod, you were a film critic in your earlier life, and you know, I'm one now. And I think a lot of people look at us as sort of like the enemy, as if we're here to knock down a film. But in a way, I mean, it's like, I don't know what your sentiment was, but you know, it's about championing the really special work when it comes through, because it is such an amazing feat of anybody to pull off a film, and then they can get lost. And this is a year in which so many things did get lost. If people are watching the Q&A, they found it. But
Peter, I want to tell you something. You're absolutely correct. And I've never heard that articulated before. But as a film critic, you really want to be remembered not so much for the films that you destroyed. You want to be remembered for the films that you kept alive. You know, I felt that way about a couple of films. I was a big champion, for example, huge champion. And if I told the full story, you'd understand. I think I did keep alive Sling Blade, Billy Bob Thornton.
Sure, yeah.
But Pauline Kael single-handedly saved Bonnie and Clyde, and single-handedly saved Nashville. And she made Last Tango in Paris, even more than she did. And so, so I do appreciate those critics, and
I mean, that's why we do it. I mean, here on Netflix, you know, this movie A Son, that from Taiwan, came out with no fanfare. When you're done watching The Outpost, click over to A Son. You know, it's the Palm Springs Film Society knows and loves subtitles. They do the work of, you know, of exploring international cinema. But these are movies that kind of are trees falling in a deserted forest these days. And
there's also I mean, so many amazing movies that are out there that we don't see nowadays, you know, partly because of how we're seeing movies nowadays and the volume of them and when they're released and how do you find them and where are they streaming or airing. But that everybody sets out to make quality movies, and everybody sets out to tell a story that's very personal that they must tell. And when you find those, it's so satisfying. And sometimes in particular, even in this movie, you know, yes, we have Orlando Bloom and Scott Eastwood as the main leads, but then you have Caleb Landry Jones, who maybe audiences aren't that familiar with. They certainly will be.
Yep.
But for me, there's a process of discovery sometimes when it's not always just a familiar star and a familiar face, because you're allowed to really get into who that person is in a way that sometimes when you're dealing with a really big star, that you have so many preconceived notions about what they're going to do next and, you know, what the expectations are. So
right.
I'm looking forward to seeing A Son after everybody watches The Outpost and stays for the end credits. And,
I don't need anyone to...
I'm just saying.
to do one over the other. There's enough time. We're all locked at home these days. Rita, you were an early hero. We're so glad everyone in your family is safe. An early survivor, I should say. You know,
Yes.
well, we hope that everyone watching this film and this Q&A is being safe at home, but also finding a way to spread the good word among your circle. Let that, I don't know, let your recommendations go viral and your behavior stay safe. But thanks so much to both of you for your time, and congratulations on the film.
And thank you for being
having us, and for anybody who is just has to put, you know, like a hold on watching the movie till the weekend or something like that. You can watch a beautiful lyric video of the song "Everybody Cries" on YouTube that they made. So it's really, you know, if you just want to go, we've been talking about the song too. If you want to go and take a look at that, that's there.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
And thank you for all your support, Peter. You know, I know that your reviews are always sincere, and you're just doing your job when you recommend a film, but thank you for recommending ours. I do appreciate it.
All right, well, thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye, Rod.